It's a cloak and dagger affair. He'll know that you're there. He won't stop until you are dead. And it's time that you knew there's someone there who's searching for you. And it's time that you believe he's gonna find you. He's gonna find you.
Why, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Two Guys Fixing the World. It's been 2 or 3 weeks since we were last here, but we got some good stuff for you today. First, though, my name is Mark David Stallard. This handsome chap here is Ryan Jans. His middle name is also David, but we do that bit on the other show. Anyhow,
it's not the worst we've ever gone up on that intro. So
yeah, no, it was intentional. I just did it because I knew it would be the best we would do. So lots of going on. So what are we fixing today?
Well, we're fixing me getting my notes. That's what we're first fixing. We're fixing employment numbers today, I believe.
Oh, that'll be the second one.
Yes. So our first topic, so employment numbers. That's a teaser for all you people. You can now return from the edge of your seat. The next one we're going to be fixing when politicians try and push unpopular policies. Is that a sign of leadership, or is it a sign of something?
I think just leaving it at that. Is it a sign of leadership? Shout out to Shalim. Shalim actually sent us a couple of questions a couple of days ago, and they were such good questions that we figured we're going to do these. A couple of things that are close to my heart, and this one here I think was great. So the question is, so when politicians are when policies are deeply unpopular, but they press ahead with them, is that a sign of leadership? So I've got an answer. Do you have an answer, Ryan?
As always, it depends on whose view of unpopular is it. In my opinion, and this is my opinion here, and I don't think yours is going to differ too terribly much. If it's unpopular for businesses and it benefits the people who voted for the politician, then absolutely press on. That's actually a sign of a good leader. If the benefit is for for a business or for stakeholders or something else, or even for the administration's sake, and it's at the expense of people, that's not a good sign of leadership. That is some bad leadership right there. So that is how I define whether it's good or bad.
Okay, I think you're right. I think we need to define what unpopular means, right? But I think I'm on the same lines as you. I was thinking of just defining it as most people don't like it. That's how I had interpreted it. And in which case, then I said no, because if most people don't, if the person's in a position of power and they've got the people have voted for them, then presumably, and this is a big presumption, that people have already agreed to that policy or to that action. That would be the assumption. Of course, that's not the case. It's rarely the case. And so my first knee-jerk reaction is, no, it's not leadership. It's only leadership if people follow you. If people don't want to go where you're taking them, that's kidnapping. Right?
Yeah, fair enough.
So that's not leading people. That's dragging. And often they'll be screaming.
Yeah, if you're being led around by the nose, that's a different story. Now, so when we talk about unpopular, if you know some of your Canadian history, and we talk about the city of Saskatoon, it's one of my favorite places to go in Canada. It's a beautiful little city, aptly named the Paris of the Prairies because it is absolutely beautiful there. Now, they have a history. Now, Saskatchewan typically has a history that's similar to Manitoba politically, where it kind of jumps back and forth between New Democratic and Conservative. That's pretty normal. Now, what happened is, and I can't remember the exact time, but there was a time when there was really literally no work. So what the government of Saskatoon, and ultimately in conjunction with the provincial government, is they started a bunch of building initiatives so that their population could actually have jobs. Very unpopular for businesses because they're trying to make ends meet, and no real. I think sounds like a depression type story, right? Like a Great Depression type story. But they built all this infrastructure, and then when that sort of period came out, the economy was ready to sort of grow. So that's leadership. That's taking care of your people. And if a couple of businesses go bust because they're banking on doing things as cheap as possible, well, that's their problem. That's not the voters' problem, right? That's not the constituents' problem. That's if they want to run their business in the ground, that's their business. That's their business to do that, right? But this is the government looking out for its people. I don't think you're going to see policies like that in nowadays, especially with our provincial government. Oh, it's doesn't look like there's work out there. Well, guess you're out of luck.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think there's the whole neoliberal idea of giving, making the businesses and the big companies, not even the small companies, the big businesses running is the only thing that seems to matter. Without the very obvious people, if people don't buy a product, then your business is dead. And if you don't give the people who are buying the product, which is everybody else, the business is going to fail, and it's not going to recover, or certainly not going to recover very quickly, particularly when you come out of it and you might be living on less than $500 a week if you're on the CERB, which is about the same as EI actually. But if you're making $1,000 a week or taking home $1,000 a week, that's fine. You're not even going to be making ends meet on that. We have. Oh, thought you were going to bring on a guest there, Ryan.
No. I have a little one who's coming to say good night to Dad. Night, sweetie.
Good night.
Time to go night.
Now that threw me there. What was I saying there? Lost my train of thought there for a sec.
We were talking about big business.
Oh yes, because I think I'd made my point there, right? So if you were given the money to the people, because the $500 no, less than $500 a week, right? $2,000 a month is what the CERB is, or the CERB, however you want to say it. And if someone is making minimum wage, that's fine. That will replace that for the most part. But if you're not, that's way under. That's not even going to cover, a family of three with a mortgage and everything that goes with it, a car or two. You're not making ends meet, right? So it's going to be a long time, even with that $2,000 a month for those people that were lucky enough to get it. It's going to be a long time getting back again, and so which is kind of really is kind of silly. Watering the plants, but putting the water over in the field next door rather than in the garden. Really, that's what they're doing. Right? It's not a very good.
Or it's almost repositioning the sprinkler so that most of it goes over the garden.
Yes, and that's even better. Yeah,
and you get a little bit. You still get a little bit of splash. So
yeah. Well, that's then the analogy breaks down.
That's as far as we'll take that one. The
trickle down doesn't work when you're throwing the water away. Anyway, so I think the problem, right? So now I think that if we limit the conversation, whereas there is a big public outcry, a particular policy is highly unpopular. And one of the big things that's Pallister is very unpopular at the moment is cutting the civil service jobs and layoffs, which we know is almost certainly not going to be backfilling when this is over. That those jobs are probably gone.
Absolutely not.
Right. And so when you get those kinds of things, then we got out. I don't know how unpopular this is, but getting Amazon to deliver PPE, right? But rather than the post office, those kinds of things, which are very clearly there's another agenda, right? This isn't doing what's best for the people. Maybe there's a fiscal conservatism going on there, which I wouldn't put past the people in power. It could be a bigger underlying ideology, which just that happens to be part of, and maybe there is a secret or an unpublished, publicized rather, goal to get rid of the post office.
Well, any kind of major system like that is okay. So as soon as you decide you want to be a conservative, you have to agree to a certain set of policies. You have to agree that big government equal bad, even though and okay. So I don't want to say that yes, okay, the government that we got is extremely efficient. Anybody who's ever tried to file a permit or anything that has to deal with mountains of paperwork and bureaucracy. I tried to get a license for handheld radios, like just handheld like walkie-talkies. So I bought like a really nice pair, and I needed to license them. And the paperwork and I got to talk to this guy, but I also have to talk to this guy, and just the sheer it never got done. I was just overwhelmed.
You can't do that online anymore.
What's that? Sorry,
you can't do that online.
A lot of it was done online, but then there was some forms that were supposed to be filled out prior, but that's not clear on their site because the Service Canada website on canada.com .ca hasn't been updated in years. So it's pretty bad. Have I frozen?
You have. Here we go.
All right. Can you still hear me?
Okay. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let me try this again. Yeah. Which is weird.
Good.
You are looking good on my screen, but not on what's going out. I wonder why.
Interesting. Yeah, on my end.
That's funny.
Yeah. On my end, I'm frozen. I'm just like.
Just gonna try something here. There we are.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've got. Anyways, technical side. Hopefully that goes up. At least we can still talk.
Weird.
It's a cloak and
Oh, there we go. I clicked the wrong button.
Wee-hee.
But it didn't fix you. That's kind of weird.
No.
Okay, Ryan is live. He's just not moving.
Two guys fixing OBS
Yes,
studios.
that's crazy. Actually, while we're here, I just want to say hi to Pauline Santoro, who's joined us. Hi, Pauline. She's been there since the beginning, just waiting for a moment to say something. There we go. Thanks, Pauline. Nice to...
Hello, Pauline. I've got a few people here on the watch party that I started up as well. Riel Gervais, Andrea Rosadnik, and I'm not sure if this is my sister or if it's my brother, but it's Kelly and Lawrence Fernandez have joined us. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yeah.
According to Shaleem, he can still hear me, but I'm frozen.
Yeah,
so that's
I can see you frozen. Yeah,
slightly
I wonder.
quizzical. I'm not sure what kind of expressions on my face there. That's pretty normal for me.
I'm not sure how to fix that. I've switched the screens. We are.
Well, we can continue on with that.
Yes,
let's
there we go.
Keep moving on down. Hey.
But which is funny. You're frozen in that screen. That's weird.
It just
okay. Anyhow.
Yeah. Well.
Oh well. Okay. You know, when you talk, I'll switch it over when you're talking. How's that?
Yeah, that's fine. So we'll move on here.
Actually, I've got lots to say on this point. If we want to.
Yes. So we were talking about what is unpopular and how it benefits, right? So I think I was trying to make a point about conservatives not liking big government and how the bureaucracy is crazy. But just because we were talking about backfilling, that's why it was. Yeah, that's where we're Pallister's most likely not going to backfill all those jobs that he cuts, and it's going to end up probably being the next NDP administration or whomever replaces the conservatives when they are eventually voted out. Will probably get refilled. So yeah, it's not leaving them very popular. That's not a very popular decision. Is it good for the country or the province overall? I doubt it. Especially when you have things like nurses, support persons for hospitals, all that kind of stuff.
They fixed it. Here we go.
I'm leaving again. That doesn't help you at all. You're making enemies of your unions, your trade unions. That doesn't help you out in any capacity. The point I was trying to make was that That's not an example of good leadership. That's just pushing things through because, and we're going to touch on this a little bit later. You're a conservative, so now you have to vote the way or act the way that conservatives expect you to act. The party expects you to act. That's a nice little segue for later.
Yeah.
Go back to
Right, and I think so. I think the spirit of the question was something that is something that people clearly don't want. So whatever that is, closing healthcare, let me say that one, defunding public services, whatever those may be. So something is unpopular. The thing is that the problem here resides with the system. Is that we've got someone in power that. And I guess right there's a problem. We're not electing people to represent us. What we're doing is we're picking the political party that is going to, that's going to do everything for us as if we're children. You can't, and maybe into some respects that's kind of what we kind of want. You take care of it, so I can do my day-to-day stuff. But we're giving them power, and rather than, because there's no real, they're not really responsible to us, right? They're responsible to the party. The party will decide what the party sets the policies. The leader just does what the party wants for the most part. And so you've got a system where, just like Shaw Television, if you want, just recently, right, we had, recently, a few years ago, the law was passed where you can pick and choose your TV stations now. At one time, you had to get the entire package if you wanted the one.
But even that isn't fully practiced. You get like a basic cable and you get to pick 3, and then you have to pay to pick the rest that you want.
Yeah,
right. It's different for everyone, and everyone's got different numbers or whatever. But it's like, hey, we've got a basic package, and then you get to pick what you X amount of what we consider premium. So, and then anything beyond those 3 is you've got to pay extra above and beyond, right? So,
right, yeah. So we've got we'll go into the problem of party politics in a bit. So we have one of the examples that I had seen was that Liberals will no longer commit to boosting old age security in July, despite the campaign pledge. And this kind of leads to the other thing is not just doing things that are unpopular, it's not doing what they said they would do in order to get your votes. So they garner your votes, if they've got it. Now they don't have to even look at you again for another 4 years. All they got to do then is throw you a bone or two right before the election next time, and maybe you'll probably vote for them again because you'd have forgotten what happened at the beginning.
Or you're just so disappointed with the other guy.
Yeah,
that you'll vote for them.
Yeah, we're seeing that a lot down south, right? Doesn't matter, just get the other guy out. But we had the same problem, right? Was we all wanted to get Harper out, and we're not really that much further ahead. Yeah,
that whole thing of anything but Harper, it's like, well, no, you really shouldn't be just saying anybody but Harper. You should be considering why you want to vote for a party, or why you want to oppose. Some people are just like, oh, I'm sick of it because of Mike Duffy, or I'm sick of it because the guy's just been in for too long. That was more of a motivation I found, that he had just been in for so long, even though he ran 2 minority governments and 1 majority government, which is where he really shot himself in the foot. And that's, if you're voting just to get someone out because they've been there for a long time and not because of any other reason, you got to give your head a shake. You really shouldn't be voting them out just because, right? Because it's time for somebody else. No. How about you look into it a little bit? This guy's got a better idea on how to do policies and what.
Yeah. So now one of the troubles we have is, and it's even under a proportional representation, you still have this problem. There's still a choice of 2. You maybe have a choice of a third, but really it's one of the 2 are going to get in. And so we don't really have that much, or we can't do a la carte politics or a la carte economics, because I've said this before. Well, yeah, you're a fiscal conservative. There are reasons to be a fiscal conservative, but I've read a couple of articles. Actually, we had one. We were talking about austerity on the last show, and Brian Pallister was being criticised by someone in the Progressive, his own party, saying this is bad. Yeah. So what was I saying? Yep, I lost my train of thought again. This would have been even worse yesterday.
But we're just really hitting on the point that they don't have to respond to us.
Yeah.
We'll tell you whatever you want. Liberals were, even in their first administration, when they had this rocking majority, they made promises that they had no intention of keeping. Yeah, we're going to retool the voting system. No, you're done.
Yep.
Months later, that died on the vine.
Yep.
Like that, they don't feel like they have to be accountable.
Yep.
Now, interesting that you brought up a point here in our notes, and just let me see if I can get to it here, where it says like, should they be held accountable to that? Yes, absolutely, they should.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Essentially, it's not contract law, but you're entering into a contract as a politician. Now, it's one thing if you don't have enough people, maybe you're in a minority situation, and you actually legitimately try and pass a bill and it gets defeated. You can say, "Hey, we tried and it just died due to democratic process." Nobody can hold you accountable. You tried, you did your best, and you'll have to wait until the next time to introduce that bill. That's fine. But just to say, no, it doesn't fit our view, or we're suddenly deciding no, or we're just going to hope that you forgot about that, that needs to be brought to light, and that needs to be, you need to account for that.
Yeah,
because that's what people are expecting. And you really, I guess either one of two things are happening. Either they have to clean up and start delivering what they promise, or we need to start thinking about what are they actually trying to say by saying what they're saying. And I think it probably needs to be a little bit of both to get this whole thing started, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, so we've got kind of three things, right? It's three issues that are kind of really the same thing when you come to the root of it. Is they decide on a policy after they're elected. Something comes up, and we'll squeeze this in. No one said anything about it at a time, which is the spirit of the question. But there's also the, we said we were going to do, we looked into it, but we decided not to, the PR thing for the Liberals. But there's also that deliberate lie. I mean, these are all facets of the same problem. These all show the same problem. There's that, they can do those things. They can outright lie. They can change their mind, even though the people that voted for them still want what they voted for. But there's no repercussions for it. Yes, there's no accountability, but there's no repercussions, particularly when you've got no choices. You in Manitoba, you've got a choice right now. It's NDP or Progressive Conservatives. Liberals, they may have a shot there. They were playing their hand pretty well up to the last election, and they what's the word? They kind of slipped on the banana peel or whatever. They kind of fell off. They did really well there for a little while.
But at the end, they were just so everyone was just so disappointed with the NDP, so they decided that they're going to go conservative, and then all of a sudden the Conservatives really showed what they can do when there's no reason to be accountable, right? So then everybody sort of brought interest in, and then all of a sudden the Liberals, for some reason, were like, yes, we're going to do this rationally and intelligently and all this, and then all of a sudden just suddenly went, I'm going crazy. So so we're going to start. So there's no accountability, and if we did decide we want to get them out, we have to vote. But then everyone's got to vote to get them out, and who are we going to put in? Well, I mean, it's a little easier here in Manitoba. I think, we've got, you could go for the Liberals, which who are trying. The NDP are probably better suited, but still, and they were all milk toast when they were in as well, right? They weren't
it's 17 years and they couldn't even shore up the employment laws. Anyhow, that is another show entirely when I get started on that.
Well, and that's worth digging into. Two guys fixing employment laws. We're going to touch on that, so we'll wet your palate. So before we get, is there anything else we want to sing on there, or bring this?
I think there were just a couple of things I wanted to round up on this one.
Yeah. Okay.
It was.
But yes. So to sum up, we need more politicians to be accountable for what they say, what they promise.
Yeah. So we got.
And there needs to actually be consequences. And I guess that one other thing too is, like, if we had the ability to vote them out midterm, that means that they're gonna your opposition has to hold in reserve the people who were running against, or at least somebody who's going to potentially run against that person. So then the question is, all right, so you get somebody who's running for office, right? And you get your parties and all their candidates and for their ridings, and that's okay, great, fine. And then whoever wins. Let's say it's the Conservative wins, and then all of a sudden they're very upset with the guy because he's misrepresenting them, or the girl, or whoever's in. We want him out. Does that mean that the NDP and the Liberals and whoever else could qualify in the provincial for provincial politics has to hold in reserve their candidates? That means, like, that's a huge thing to consider. Does that just mean, oh well, hey, you were a school teacher, right? It was easy in the summer because you didn't have school, and now you're in the middle of a school year and you want to be a politician. Well, do you quit your job? Can you get leave to do that? Like, it's a thing, right? It's a real thing.
The problem. It's the problem with having professional politicians, and that's a problem. Is that we're just electing executives. With the CEO and the executives, and we're not even selecting who the executives are. Those get selected by the leader, which, just so everyone is clear, even though it's the leader of the party with the most votes that gets that becomes the prime minister, is actually selected by the governor general. The Queen's representative selects our prime minister. I'm not sure if Manitoba's constitution is the same. But even so, we don't get to select our prime minister either. It just happens to be the leader of the party.
That's right. Yeah.
And so we're not even voting for our prime minister. And then the prime minister that really wasn't voted into that role gets to select and handpick the people who. So we're not really. It's not really even. We're just selecting someone. In this case, provincially, we're selecting someone to select the government, as opposed to. Federally, where it was the Queen's representative selects the person that's going to select the government, and it's going to be all from his party or her party. Right? There's not going to be any fair representation in government. So we have a problem there, and for that respect, then we can't get them out. I'm not even sure how we would even get them out, other than mass riots in the streets and protests. So we've effectively got someone that is going to do what they want. So, they're going to maybe toe the party line. Or if they're a strong, boisterous, not boisterous is not the right word, strong, fierce leader that unbending, and they'll do what he wants. Well, we have a dictator for 5 years, whichever way you look at it.
Exactly.
We're kind of stuck.
There's a fine line. I think you hit it on the nail right on the head. There's a very fine line between leadership in the sense of, like, a broader term that is considered for its entire working party, and a leader who's charismatic and all these different characteristics that devolves into a dictator. So there's a very fine line, and a good solid leader can become a dictator, and a dictator can shake his head and wake up one morning and become a good leader. So it's not mutually exclusive. But I think we've kicked that one pretty good.
Couple more points. I can do this fairly quickly. So the politicians. We give the politicians the power to act on our behalf. So effectively, we're giving them power of attorney. We no longer have a say. That's a problem, and we've got no way of getting them out. And the real point then that I kind of want to get across, if anything, is just to say this is just to point how weak the political party system is and how democratic it is not. Is if they represent us, then we would have the power, and they would not be able to act without our direction. They can do pretty much what they want within the bounds of the political party and of the political system, but we don't have a say in it. So we are not the ones in power. They don't represent us. They represent their own small little group of people who are making up the policies in a back room somewhere. Anyhow, now the horse is well and truly dead and beaten.
There you go. We've kicked the dead horse many times. It will never mess with us again. So yeah, that's we're moving on to our next topic of discussion.
And what are we fixing on this one? What are we fixing on this one, Ryan?
This one we are fixing unemployment numbers. And
fixing them.
Before we, yeah, we're fixing them. We're fixing some numbers here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to see a dime out of this, so don't worry. It's not really illegal. So before we get digging into this, we're going to say hello to a couple of people who've joined us. They joined us a little while back, but we just didn't really have a good chance to say hi to them. Agnes Kiss, David Reimer, Huyan Chan, all the way in Calgary. And looks like Shalim left and now has rejoined us again. So welcome, everybody.
Goodbye. Hello, Shalim, and thanks for everybody else for joining us.
Yeah. Oh, no, he left and then came back. I just saw that he came back. So so maybe just he left my watch party.
Well, it was his fault. That question was his fault. So he should have listened.
Maybe that's why he left.
Yeah, maybe he was embarrassed. Yeah. Okay.
I doubt it. It was an intelligent question. He just asked it to the wrong guy.
Well, I was looking more of the rambling answers. Anyhow.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
okay.
The question then was, the question as it was put to us, should governments reveal the real unemployment rate? Okay, so those of you who are not sure what this really means is that when you hear the unemployment numbers, and what you're really getting is a kind of an economist's idea of, I guess, trying to be clever, trying to categorize this. The employment rates are based pretty much on people who are actively looking for work, on unemployment. People who are not on there are people that maybe have gone back to school or have just stopped looking for work and no longer taking or receiving unemployment, that kind of thing. And the real numbers actually reflect are about double. Actually, the real unemployment of people who are really not working is going to be double that. So if the employment rate says it's 5%, then the actual unemployment is 10%. So, Ryan, should the real numbers be used?
Yes, absolutely. I think you could categorize it better and just give better definition when you're talking unemployment. Unemployment, unpopular. We're in the stage of the defining these words that are very vague. I think what you could say, you could make your unemployment or your economy look really good because you've only got 3% unemployment. Well, that's only 3% of people actually actively looking for work who don't have it. They're not, like you said, they're not counting people who have just given up, who are no longer, or who are maybe on a long-term disability or going back to school or for whatever reason can't work. Those numbers get lost and those need to be included. Sure, you could say 3% based on this criteria, but you need to include all of them. It's just the same way that you can just modify and change stats. I always pick on MPI about this and their and the photo cameras that got set up in the city of Winnipeg here. They say that they pick an intersection. You pick any intersection in the city where they put up just a speed camera, not the mobile enforcement zones, but just the speed camera. They will tell you that they put the speed camera there because they want to reduce deadly T-bone crashes. Well, if you look at the date series over 10 years, and you look at the number of T-bone crashes and the number of deadly T-bone crashes, and you get a series of numbers over 10 years, and then you do another 10-year series of what's happened over while that camera has been effective, they'll come back and say, hey, look, we have less T-bone crashes there. But if you only had one or two over 10 years, it's kind of a statistical anomaly. And if you don't have any, you can say that you've reduced it by 100%. Wow, that's an effective camera.
Yeah.
But if it was a statistical aberration to begin with, you haven't really done anything.
Yeah.
and you're not giving a comparison as to what it actually might have caused. Maybe it's caused more people to get rear-ended. Maybe it's caused more people to sideswipe because they can't stop because they don't anticipate
Right.
the light changing. You're not showing the whole picture. But if you say we reduced it by 100%, oh, hot damn, that sounds good.
Yep.
And Shalim is apologizing. He said he left by mistake. He really enjoys the discussion so far. Intelligent discourse. Oh, thanks, Shalim.
Thanks for coming back.
I'll send you.
Appreciate
I'll send you $5.
Okay, so the unemployed. So the answers. I think one of the problems is that there's a lot of discussion on saying, well, right now in the US, the unemployment rate is almost as bad as it was in the Great Depression. I think it may have even gone below that. But during the Great Depression, they were giving the real unemployment rates, and not the 10-15% or whatever it is now. Now we end up with a political problem if we are able to convince someone to change the unemployment rates, because if the unemployment rates don't change, but a political party comes in and it's 5%, but when they leave, it's 10%. No, I don't think there's very many political parties, any leaders that are going to want to do a decent job, keep the economy stable, but the numbers are going to make them look bad. So it's going to be very difficult for them to change now, I think. So it would have to be a lot of publicity and advertisements, getting people that information in order to let people realize that this is not the case. So there'll be a lot of PR. That's the word I was looking for. But the real problem here is, I think we can probably move on into the idea of unemployment, why it's not being treated that carefully or treated that seriously, is that because some economists, a number of economists, particularly ones that are advising governments, will actually call 5 to 10% unemployment, and we'll call that full employment. Yes, we're living in 1984 and doublespeak. So 5 to 10% unemployment is full employment. And the reason that they do that is purely economics, because it's really, really, really good if you're an employer. So then you'll have a lot of potential employees to pick from. A lot of people are going to be competing for your job. If you have more unemployed than there are jobs. So if someone leaves, you can replace them immediately. You can easily replace unwanted employees. So now with the wonderful unemployment law, which is you're no longer a fit for the team, you can be let go, business reasons, whatever, you're gone. And if you've been there less than 5 years, 2 weeks notice, and that's it. So that's really good for employers. It gives them a lot of power, but it takes away a lot from employees.
And just keeping that work pool open, even for working professionals. I fall under the skilled trade. I'm in a skilled trade, so I have a job that has very niche, but is also in fairly high demand. But if that unemployment rate is low, that means there's potential for more competition. That means I'm in competition with fellow technicians and fellow skilled workers. So that means ultimately our wages are going to be reduced, and we're all going to be competing for lower wages, right? And that's not good for anybody all the way around. That's not good for the economy. That's not good for, actually, it only benefits one set of people, and that's your shareholders or the people at the top, because they don't have to pay out as much, right? Yeah. And now all of a sudden, and this is, again, it's all about perception, right? If you look at the way a job is sold, right, what the costs are, and what the burden rate is, that's the worker plus all his expenses and all that stuff. That's a burden rate against what the job is. If the burden rate is about $50 an hour to run a guy in a van to do your work, or 50 or 55, sometimes it's as high as 60, depending on how you've spent your money. If you only have to pay that guy, instead of paying that guy 27, 28, 29, that makes your margin higher if you can pay him 23 or 20 or 18 or 17. then you make huge amounts, but you've never changed your margin, but your margin becomes that much more profitable, right? So it,
Yeah.
it only benefits people at the top.
Yeah. And as I've mentioned before, and if you've watched the show before, you probably would have heard me say something along these lines. But here in Manitoba, we've got, if you work for someone for a company less than 2 years, all they legally have to do is give you 2 weeks' notice and goodbye. You don't even need a good solid reason to get rid of you. Now, the argument I've heard was, well, businesses also, you can give them 2 weeks' notice. Therefore, it's the same. But it's not the same. It's certainly not equitable. The difference being is that as an employee or someone that's looking for work, you get let go. You've got your money will last you 2 weeks, and hopefully you have been working long enough. You got some EI. Otherwise, you're really screwed.
Yep.
But it could take you months, if not years, to find another job. All right. An employer, because the unemployment pool is so big, they could literally have someone replacing you within the week.
Yep.
I've been, as a manager, I have hired people in that short time. And I've also been on the other end of it where I've been laid off. And it's been 10 or 11 months before I found another job. So this is this is real life. This really has happened to us. And it's actually a lot worse than that, because when you do finally find a job, you're in that position where you're a little bit desperate there. Maybe you're shooting for the lower end of jobs. The market drops a little bit, and you take less money. It happens a second time, you get even less money.
Yeah.
And I'm making half of what my last job I was making half of what I was making 10 years ago, and that's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing basically the same work. So you have actually no power at all. The businesses and the companies benefit greatly from this, and you lose all power. And particularly when so it keeps the wages low, you have your fear of losing a job or getting laid off. So you keep quiet and you just hope you have a job. And it gives you a real feeling of powerlessness. And it keeps you in line, right? And yeah, I made that point.
And then you start to worry. Well, can I make my obligations? Can I make my mortgage or my rent? Can I make my car payment? Can I make the insurance for my car? If I can afford to do all that, can I even put gas in the vehicle, right? Do I get to eat today? Or do I have to choose between Mr. Noodles, or do I get to actually have a Big Mac today, right? Like, those are the kind of things that you have to...
Not much of a choice.
What's that?
Not much of a choice there.
No, not much of a choice at all. And both of them are equally bad for you. Probably Mr. Noodles will keep you alive a little longer.
Yeah,
but,
if you can stomach it. Anyhow.
Yeah, but yeah, the whole point is it's fear. It's this fear about, oh, well, I won't be able to make my payments. I won't be able to make my obligations. And if I can't do that, then my credit's going to get hit, and then I won't be able to do this, and I won't be able to do that. So it's all about this fear that they've got in you. And if you have I know exactly what it's like, because I've been laid off. I've been out of work. I've been in. It's not easy to. It really isn't easy to try and make ends meet when you got nothing coming in, and you've got obligations, and you've got, and even just a powerful need to eat, right? Like forget the obligations. I still got to eat. I still want to live, and we've sort of devolved our society to be revolving around these numbers. Oh, it's 3%, it's 5%, it's this percent, it's this much of money, and it's just all devolved into numbers. And there's sort of this human aspect of it that gets completely missed.
Yeah, and by design.
Yeah, and that's, we're so busy looking at all our numbers that we kind of forget the human element. We forget about you and me. And then when we look at, and then it gets even worse, because as soon as we only focus on the numbers, we can dehumanize other people. So when you look at someone who is been out of work for a year, what do you automatically think? What kind of crappy employee was that guy? Or you hear about people going bankrupt. Well, why did you go bankrupt? Well, couldn't find work for 2 years.
Yeah.
Had to sell the house, had to sell the car.
And so the whole thing is actually endemic. It's built into the system, right? It was in the 1970s. You had employee relations. By the end of the 1970s, early 1980s, they were no longer employee relations. It was human resources. You're just an object, something to be assigned and to be moved around and to be discarded. And that's by design. And if you've ever dealt with anyone in HR, they don't smile a lot. They're very difficult, particularly the people that have been there for years and years. So there are a lot of them. I say all of them. Some of them have been very nice. But the people that are firing people, that are just letting people go and are treating them like objects, a little bit of their soul has gone. I'm sure it has. I'm sure they lose a little piece of their humanity.
Yeah, and I mean, Dilbert got it right when they talk about the evil director of human resources. Like, that's a person who literally looks at you and says, assigns a value based on a number or a percentage, and factors you into a formula and sees if that particular number fits into their plan.
Yeah.
That's quite the rabbit trail we've got.
Yeah. So that's actually, so the answer is yes, we absolutely should be using the full numbers. We need to understand that the ridiculousness of the full employment being any percentage of unemployment. If someone's available for work, they want to work, they're able to work, they should be counted whether or not they're actively looking. Because there's a lot of people that are just not actively looking because no one will hire them. Maybe they've gone to an interview. If I go for an interview in IT, there's going to be at least 2 interviews. That's 2 hours of my life, and I've got to go and drive there, wherever it is. So it's probably every interview is going to be 2 to 3 hours. I've got to schedule for it. So there's a day just for 2 interviews, right? If I get a second interview, and often there are so many people looking for my line of work you just happen to be there on the right day, and if the person you're interviewing with has a bad day, and if you're having a bad, it's screwed, right?
Well, and some of it too is, and I've learned the value of this, and especially becoming into a skilled trade. You always have your resume out there, and you ultimately get headhunted, and I know what guys in my field get paid, what top end guys get paid, and that's not because their skill level is so amazing. That's just because they've been around long enough. They've stuck with the company for 10, 15, 20 years. I know what they get paid, and I know what a good person or like just the average worker gets paid. So you could get a feel for that. I don't fight over pennies, but I do fight for time, right? I want to fight for, hey, I've been with this company for 3 years. You have to match my vacation pay or my vacation time. It's only an extra week, but man, that's killed I've never made it to an interview where, actually I shouldn't say that. I made it to one interview, and that there was a condition that they threw out and said, well, we'll start you at 2 for the first year, but immediately go up to 3 instead of taking the normal 4 year or whatever it was time frame. I was like, that is unacceptable. My time is valuable, and I don't expect to be spending 50 or 60 hours a week and then only get a paltry 2 weeks vacation time. Like,
I know. I know. Again, I've said this before, but just purely on the numbers of how many weeks vacation you get. Here in Manitoba, we get 2 weeks, which is 2 weeks less than they get in Iran. Okay, there we go. That's just regular vacation. That's not a holiday. It's not state holidays. That's not religious days. That's just time off. And that's entry level, right? Yeah. Anyhow, I've said that before.
Well, France has similar stuff too, where they give you a lot of time off. And I think what they're finding in this pandemic thing, and I think this is why it shouldn't really be too much of a surprise that we're pushing towards a recession, and that there might want to be a recession and a collapse of workers, is you're finding that a lot of people can do their work from home, and that there's absolutely no need for them to be there 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And you're essentially getting 8 hours worth of work. And then that's going to ask you, like, is this a justification for laying people off, or is this a justification to increase their workload? Because now you're finding, oh, well, I have kids at home, so I have to watch them, but they're still getting the same amount of productivity done, which means they're probably more like 4 hours a day, but you're getting 4 hours a day out of them, or and paying them for essentially 8. So they're either going to look at that and say, I have to give you more work, or I have to cut your hours.
Yeah.
But they're not going to increase the wage to offset that.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's easier to bully people and make them work 8 hours. But then they got to be asking themselves, when they're in the office for 8 hours a day, are they actually really working 8 hours? Or are they just looking like they're working 8 hours? Because when you're at home, you could get the same amount of work done in about 4 or 5 hours. So either your environment is toxic, or you have grossly mismanaged your workload.
For sure. I'm not the other thing on the same lines is that there are a lot of people who are running their business on shoestring's not the right word. A skeleton crew, right? How many of them are going to go realize, hey, we can do the same work, and we don't need all these people? And how many people are not going to get calls back? I suspect there will be a few of those. Because anyhow, so I think we can call that one done, and we can move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Should be a little bit of a lighter one, a little bit of a shorter one now. My question. This is my question. I asked us this. Should
That's a good question.
should Canadian politicians renounce their second citizenship? Well, so what actually brought this up was Scheer, the current leader of the party, the Conservative Party of Canada, is also an American citizen, and he said he was going to renounce it, and he never did, and now he's saying, I'm not going to do it now because I'm never going to be Prime Minister. And which is true, right? He has stepped down, unless Justin Trudeau calls a snap election. I don't know how likely that is. I did see something, a comment to that effect, in which case then, oh no. So, what are your thoughts?
I think that would be a hard one to justify. I don't think. Okay. So we were talking a bit off air before this, so I'm gonna lay it out the way that I did.
Mm-hmm.
I don't particularly care that he's American. This is Scheer. I don't particularly care that he's American. I really just care that he said he was going to do it and he didn't, and that ties in very much with what we were talking about before. I think Canada is just too multicultural and too. There's too much immigration. We rely too much on immigration for population growth, as opposed to, say, just regular sort of organic population growth. So I think that forcing someone to sort of just deny their home citizen, I think that's hard. I think the only way that you really should is if I'm going to pick on the States because it's easy. If your dad was like a shareholder in Westinghouse, and you now are a passive shareholder in Westinghouse because of that, but now you've moved to Canada and you're a Canadian, a dual citizen, and you're still receiving benefits from that, you should have to actually not receive benefits from that if you want to become a politician, because now you're going to are you making policies based on there, and guess who's going to get the contract? People who are subsidiaries of Westinghouse. Westinghouse is a big electrical company, for anybody who's not sure about what I'm
It's a
talking
conflict
about
of
here, but
interest.
I just think that they're big.
Where
right?
there's a chance of a conflict of interest, but what you're saying though is not really so much anything to do with citizenship. Has really to do with the potential money changing hands. Because that
Well, I
you
think
got the same
we got to be
arguments.
careful because we're so globalized now
Yeah.
that if you are like a beneficiary or closely related to somebody who's ahead or high up or very high up in a multinational corporation, we have to be very careful about that. And I think the onus would be, the burden of proof is on the person who's going to run to become a politician or a prime minister or a premier or a mayor or whatever level of politics, to prove that you are not able to do that. That you're not gonna show partiality. You're not gonna immediately put yourself into the conflict of interest. See, I mean, I can honestly say that I was born in Canada, but obviously you weren't. right? Now, if
What-
you were
what-
going to run for
what?
political office and they said, Mark, you have to deny your UK citizenship just to be able to run, is that reasonable? I don't think so.
Yeah, well, it's how necessary is it, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't bother me. I mean, I've been living in Canada for 30
Well,
years.
I mean,
So it's this. I self-identify as Canadian. Obviously, I sound like one.
Yeah.
And no, so it wouldn't really be that big a deal. But the question is, like I said, what difference will it make? If in Andrew Scheer's position, he is in office. He's been an MP. He's been part of the cabinet, right? Well, actually, was he? No, he's part of an MP. He's in a position of power. What's the difference if he's in a position of power in the cabinet or leading a committee, and it's okay for him to be a US citizen there, but as soon as he goes into the Prime Minister's office, he's got to renounce his US citizenship? Doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? It sounds really, really petty and ridiculous.
Well, and that's exactly what it is. I think this whole thing is more bad reporting. I want everybody to mark this on their calendar. I'm actually standing up for a conservative here on the show. This is the first time in a very long time, and probably the first time
Careful.
in one of those rare occasions. I think it's just pettiness. Yeah, I think you make a very excellent point. What if you've already gone through the political process? If you've been elected, who cares, right? Who really cares if he's an American citizen? Right? We don't adopt it. We're not the United States. You don't have to be born in America to be the prime minister. You like it. We don't have that.
Yeah.
And I don't think
really, if it matters at the top, it should matter at every level of government wherever you are. Having that ridiculous arbitrary standard for a PM, but not for a cabinet minister, but not for an MP, not for an MLA. And not other areas of local government, or for a mayor. I mean, it's kind of silly.
Even mayoral candidates. If you think of what the controversies that we've had just in the city with land transfer taxes, sweetheart deals, making like the person who you deal with your land transfers and people who hold the land, making them like administrative or city managers and stuff like man, that's a problem. But I mean, I guess the real problem is, and this is where really the point I was trying to drag home. If you are a person who has ties to the United States and is looking to do business, and you're a dual citizen and you have holdings in the States that will benefit from you being in power, right? You're suddenly going to make it a lot laxer law for your company to come over and plant in Canada, or your holding company that's held by another company that's actually a shell corporation that holds up you, right? That if that sort of like conglomeration, it makes it easier for them to operate in here, you should be renouncing that citizenship, right? Because you're
Again,
is it
the citizenship that's going to be the problem, or it'll be the other pre-existing relationship with that enterprise? It's not really the citizen, because you could have the same problem. Be a family member, could be a family member or just buds with someone in the US that's in that same position, and the same corruption can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
This is true.
So it's not really. It's not really what you're pointing on is very important, but it doesn't have an awful lot to do with citizenship.
No, it doesn't really,
right?
actually. But I mean, that's. I mean, but you get the point.
Yeah.
That's the only. And I'm not saying that I
be
want him to resign because he's American. I don't. Like I said before, I don't really care that he's American, but I do care that he said I'm going to do it. But now that there's no hope, I'm not. Forget it. It doesn't fit my plan now. What?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just for the record, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, is an American citizen.
Mm-hmm.
He is. He's got dual citizenship. Not a big deal there. I think in that particular case, you're not really sure. I think his ideology comes from just being a rich SOB that's never had to work for anything in his life. It was all handed to him on a silver spoon, with a silver platter, fed with a silver spoon, born with a silver spoon in his hand, whatever.
Sure,
that's the bigger problem. The bigger problem is that he's a commissioned officer. He's off the right stock, and for someone who's not of who was a non-commissioned officer, someone that had earned his position, doesn't get an opportunity to be in those kinds of roles.
Yep.
Anyhow, yeah. So I think that's kind of it. It's just to kind of summarize there. It was kind of pointless unless it is going to be, if it could be used as in any kind of conflict, or could cause any kind of conflict of interest. I can probably think of some examples, trade deals, that kind of thing.
Well, and that's just where I was thinking. If you are and you do have ties to these globalized companies, that's like your last thing that you want to do is renounce your citizenship. Right? The whole point is we need to show that you're not invested in a big corporation and that you're actually going to act on behalf of the people.
That's
and
the biggest thing. Is, are you invested in that bigger corporation? Because really, the free trade deals have nothing to do with governments, right? They have to do with giving corporations more power, less restrictions, so that they can cross borders with ease, and so on. So again, I mean, I'm kind of arguing against myself there.
Well, I think at this point it's a weak point, and I only say that as like an extreme measure, right? I mean, and sometimes those relationships can be super complicated, and it might just be easier to say, hey, no, you just can't have interaction with that part of your citizenship, or maybe we just have to suspend your dual citizenship. You are going to act on behalf of Canada. So if you're a dual citizenship like Mr. Scheer is, then hey, you know what? We're going to temporarily suspend your dual citizenship. You are a Canadian citizen until you are released from your office.
Yeah, then what's the point?
Yeah.
If it's only going to be temporary, what's the point?
It's just a compromise.
It has no value. There's no value. That's at all, surely. It's purely symbolic. He may as well just say, I don't think of myself as American, and that should be good enough. Yeah. Otherwise, if you're just going to get it back when he's done, it's like, no, that's so silly. Yeah. And,
again, it's just possible solutions, possible things to entertain.
Geopolitics, right? So, it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. If you're not trustworthy,
not a lot of it
there are probably other reasons. If that citizenship is a problem, there are probably other reasons other than your citizenship why you shouldn't be in those positions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been going for about over an hour. Did you want to leave that last point for next time? We were going to talk
about the corruption at the top. Well, we kind of hinted on it.
No, we were going to talk about the government as an essential service.
Government, yes.
That might be good to leave for next time.
Yeah, and we've already kind of segued a little bit into what we were just talking about, the corruption at the top.
Yeah. We can talk about that a little bit more with some more examples.
Yeah, because we're kind of already on that topic there.
Yeah.
So yes, governments as essential services and schools as essential services. We'll dig into that. It'll be two guys fixing essential services.
Fixing the next week. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Okay. And be prepared for me to have some rants because I've been working through this whole pandemic here because my job is considered to be essential, and that, as I've said many times, has been bittersweet. I'm very grateful that I still have a job. I'm very happy that I get to help people, but there are some days at work where it's just like, man alive. But now it's a little better now that PPE is more readily available and you can mitigate better, but man, it's still, there's some days where it's kind of scary. So expect a good rant next week.
Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. You can catch all the previous episodes on fixingtheworld.ca, and you can go either contact if you have any questions for us, things you would like us to comment on. Just leave a comment on the video. We're also on YouTube as well, or you can go to the website, and we've got a contact page on there. You can contact me through, or contact us through that. Sorry, I'm being a little egocentric there, just me. We'd be happy to address your questions. So I think that's good. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll catch you. I'm not sure when, maybe next week, but we'll try and get the publicity out a bit earlier next time. Thanks a lot, everyone, and we'll catch you next time. Bye. This is the back door to the Manitoba Legislature. Now, if you hit the subscribe button now, hit the notification bell, then you won't be surprised when they try to stick something up your back door.
Talk. He doesn't want you to talk, he wants you to die, Mr. Bond. And it's time that you knew there's someone there who's searching for you, and it's time that you believe he's gonna find you.